Hello, and welcome to this BAFTA Crew EGX panel on Leading the Way, where we're basically going to have a panel where we discuss uh, leadership positions in games and how uh, basically our different experiences in terms of how that's impacted our work. I'm Husban Siddiqi, or more commonly known as online as McDougal. I'm currently working on Rogue Eclipse, a arcadey pew pew style combat game. It looks great. Um, and yeah, I've been an independent developer for several years now. And I'll just allow the panel to introduce themselves. So, how about yourself, Paula?
I'm Paula Lucas. I'm the art lead at Ant Workshop. I've been in the games industry for about 8 years now. Originally started in New Zealand and moved over to Scotland back in 2017, and I've been here ever since. Um, Alan.
Yes, I'm Alan Yeats. I'm the co-founder and technical director at Poxless Hands. Been in the games industry for 6 years now, so it's getting there.
Oh, is it me last? Oh, well, mine's not as impressive. I'm Robyn Murphy. I'm actually a creative producer at Kwalee, which is a mobile game studio, mobile publisher, and recently they've dipped into PC console publishing as well. And I've been in the industry for about two and a bit years now. Yeah, so a bit less than you guys, but yeah.
All right, good stuff. So I guess we'll start with Alan. How did you end up in the position that you're at? Like, what was your journey there? And then I think from that, everyone else
Yeah,
can follow.
so I started my company just out of university with a group of friends. So it's going to be very much a baptism of fire in terms of getting into position. At university is a third year project where we kind of came together as students and we wanted to make a game, and then we also wanted to make a company, and so how kind of worked our way towards developing this game, but all based around trying to make the company and make the company feasible to going forward, not just one game. So from that we did lots of small contract work and just kind of building up on what we did. At the time though, it was kind of very much us individually making the projects, where as we've moved towards it's and adding more people into the team, it's more and more turned into kind of a leadership role of where we have to kind of direct people and make sure we're kind of all pushing in the right direction.
Fantastic. And Paula, how about yourself?
I've sort of previously spent time sort of working as a 3D generalist, moving from sort of junior roles to mid-level. Um, and then I took a break for about a year doing some freelance work and things like that. Um, and then last April, this position came up with a workshop where I was sort of expanding from basically being like a 1 to 2 person team to actually starting to sort of to grow into like a proper sort of team that didn't just do sort of porting work and stuff like that, and more in-house people. So this position came up, and I was really excited to be part of something that was sort of grown from the ground up. So yeah, applied and got the position.
Fantastic. And Robin, finally, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I began like quite a lot of people, I think, in the industry where I did a quite a general university games design degree, which kind of introduced us to a lot of different roles. And you couldn't specialize in production. It wasn't really something you could kind of study and write your projects on stuff. So I kind of took more of an art role because it was something that I was experienced with prior to my degree. But I think I just kind of fell into that. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like you can prepare yourself for this sort of role, but sometimes you do fall into it when it comes to leadership roles. And I really enjoyed the sort of production route. I started in the industry as a QA. I got some experience in QA, which I did think was really important to kind of giving me an insight into the different areas, like departments of, a game development team. And then from there, I kind of climbed my way up through an assistant producer position in a different studio, and then to where I am now, which is a creative producer for marketing. So yeah, and through that, I've kind of my teams have grown bigger with more, like with more responsibility with each role. So I guess it's kind of like that I'm the sort of example of like the steady sort of climb in that sort of, department. Whereas I know some people can kind of move from certain roles into higher production. But yeah, I'm pretty typical, I think, when it comes to producers. So yeah.
No, that's actually that's a great jumping off point to what I was gonna ask
Oh, cool.
everyone else, which is basically like so transitioning from say doing the position that you were in towards all of a sudden having to manage people. Can you just just describe like how the the changes you experienced in terms of moving from a team member to all of a sudden
Yeah.
having to leading people?
I guess I'll go first this time. I mean, because mine's more of like the typical sort of slow and steady climb into what, I think some people, like you guys have said, sometimes you end up like kind of assimilating into a leadership role, whereas some people kind of from the gate know that that's what they want to get into. And I feel like that I was more on that end of the spectrum. So, oh, I nearly knocked that over. As
All good.
as a as a team member progressing into sort of like a leadership role, I think that it's something I at the time didn't think was important, but experiencing being a member of the team under management to move into management is so important. I just found a lot more of my sort of compassion towards the the experts in the field as opposed to being as looming over them as someone who works with their schedules, etc. It Yeah, I feel like that was the only way I could see myself progressing, was starting as a team member, experiencing the people who I would then be producing for. I don't really have any stories of, me having a completely different job role, being an artist or an engineer prior to going into production. It's kind of always been that sort of direction for me. But I definitely, yeah, I definitely think kind of starting from a lower level was what kind of gave me the skills to get into like this sort of role I'm in now. Yeah. But
Uh,
I know there's different ways, but
no,
yeah.
no, sure, but I think going off of that, so um, move. So how do the rest of you feel in terms of the transition moving from junior to a leadership position? Um, Alan, just to briefly go through, did you find any similarities in that in terms of that have rather than like immediately jumping into leadership, the importance of say working within the team to all of a sudden then leading the team? Like, did you
It's
find that as well as in how beneficial that was?
it's going to be kind of different situation where I've always kind of been in that sort of leadership role pretty much throughout the career. So it's not kind of been as gradual. It's been more as a gradual going from a smaller team and kind of very much let's make a small project to now we have more projects. So it's managing a larger scale, which is kind of very different where you're managing things you're not actively working on or kind of talking with projects. It's very different from the experience of leadership when you're not
Mm-hmm.
actively working. You need to trust your team a lot better and kind of understand. Obviously, you know what they're doing, but kind of understand what the whole project is and how you go and kind of giving your experience on that from past projects and making sure that everyone's happy and there's no kind of big flags and making sure it's all ticking along.
No, sure. I definitely just from my perspective, going from someone who's working on a team to all of a sudden having to lead a team, I definitely think there is a value to understanding at least the people you'll be managing, understanding what their craft is and how the challenges they face, for instance. And I think having that experience, right, allows us to uh, shall we say, for lack of a better term, better manage certain
Well, no, I
situations
mean,
because we've been through that. Yeah, go ahead,
yeah.
Robyn.
No, no, I was just going to say, like, we've all been there where someone is giving you sort of demands or orders when they have no clue what it takes to kind of to achieve said, result. And it's frustrating. And, you know, yeah. So like definitely I feel like even though there is some people, like you said, who do just dive straight into leadership, it I feel like the majority do kind of, yeah, it's sort of a slow, sort of steady getting to experience what it is that you're going to be asking for in the future. So yeah.
Yeah. And didn't want to let Paula escape.
Yeah.
So Paula,
Yeah.
I want to ask you. So transitioning from small scale contractor to then all of a sudden art direction, how have you felt that your responsibilities have changed what you would have between, you know, working as an artist on a team versus all of a sudden, like art direction has a broad set of responsibilities that go alongside it, right? Because it goes beyond uh, just curating what's there, but ultimately can even be defining an entire vision for how a project looks. So why don't you take us through
Yeah.
a little bit of that?
I think that would probably be one of the biggest changes, like you say as well. Instead of just thinking about individual tasks, you suddenly have to think about the project in its entirety, which I think that was probably the biggest transition I had to make. Instead of just, especially freelancing, if someone approaches you and they're like, right, cool, can you make these models? You're like, awesome, made these models. And you're not really thinking about the project as a whole, because that sort of isn't your job, like depending
Right. Yeah.
on what you're doing. Whereas with art direction is sort of dealing with the project as a whole. You have to sort of break everything down to its different parts and sort of think a lot more about pipelines, as well as a lot more sort of technical things, like the less fun parts of art, which is like, right, okay, how is this actually going to go in game? Like, is this scalable? Is this, all those sorts of things that like previously in a team working under someone else, they'd tell you like, no, we're not doing that. Now you have to be the one that's like, okay, like let's not do that. Like,
So on that, so that actually kind of veers near what Alan was talking about in terms of having to let go of things. What have you found are things that you've had to let go in terms of transitioning to your new responsibilities versus what you would have done before? Because as he said, because of the transition to a new position, it just isn't feasible to take the same amount of time that you would have had in a junior position, for instance, and then try to art direct. So what have you felt? What are the trade-offs you feel you've had to make, and maybe even go into like some of the more perhaps mundane things that you've kind of had to that you've had to get used to.
yeah, I'd say probably the biggest thing to get used to is just thinking like it doesn't have to all be perfect. Like, especially as the team that like I'm on, like a lot of the time, if we don't have freelancers and doing stuff, um, there'll be a bunch of stuff I've not done before, but it's just kind of, being kind to yourself when you're not great at something that you do for the first time or that sort of stuff as well. And sort of just, instead of just doing one particular role, because it encompasses a lot more things, like a lot more things, just kind of, just being a bit more like kind and not being like, why is this not perfect? Like, I guess that's probably the biggest thing.
As in, it's understanding that ultimately, we in being a leader to some extent, it's also understanding that you're the one who has to make the cuts, right? As in, you're the one who has to, because ultimately the direction of the project is impacts the outcome. So to some extent, it is having to let go, right?
Yes.
Alan, in terms of what you've experienced, what kind of things have you felt that in your position that you've needed to, as in what elements have you had to take a back seat in, and what elements have you kind of had to have more of a hand in? So just to give you an example, so for myself, last year, when I was on the EGX panel, then the trade-off I discussed was the fact that I'm not spending my entire week programming. I spent the majority of my week on non-programming related activities, even though that's kind of the thing that I'm into. So how about yourself, Alan?
Yeah, I kind of also totally agree with Paula's points previously about how you kind of have to let things go, and that kind of goes on to sometimes you can't have an opinion on everything, and you have to accept that you need to start, like, as your team grows and as you grow and you delegate more, you can't have a decision, you can't make a decision on everything. Like you have to be able to delegate that and say that might not be what I was thinking, but it works and that's good. And that's work, but then not kind of on the same way. Sometimes you do have to kind of go in and say, this is going to take, I see what you're doing is looking really good, but you're going to have to scale it down. Like it's going to take too long. As you say, you've seen the whole project, you need to kind of scale that down more. I think that is kind of the biggest thing, is programming less and kind of making sure that the whole project's getting there further, and how can we make sure that everyone's time is best spent. Is it best to spend some more of my time doing this part of the programming, or is it better for me to make sure that the team is working better together as a kind of more well-oiled machine?
Yeah. There are certainly a lot more aspects, I think, to leadership than folks realize, especially when all of a sudden it's, and I mean, to some extent you experience it when you're working alongside others, but then all of a sudden when you're having to manage them, for instance. What I'm just gonna freeball this one out there, but what kind of skills and qualities have you both seen from the side of leaders, like as in good qualities that you've seen in leaders that you've worked for, and then how have you taken lessons from previous managers, and how have you applied that to yourselves? So like Robyn, do you want to discuss just like
Yeah.
how that plays out?
Yeah, because I think as someone I was an assistant to a producer and then went into being a producer. A lot that was a massive learning experience in terms of I think, at first I thought that the leader slash manager slash producer, whatever your job role is, I thought that they were the total authority on most of the stuff that the people who work under them, and I kind of quickly learned that you aren't the authority. So you aren't the lead artist. Well, I mean, some people are, but a lot of the time, you're not the lead artist, you're not the lead programmer, you're not the lead designer. You are helping keep the communication together. You're monitoring the dates, you're handling resources, external, etc. But when it comes to executive decisions on things, you can be involved, but you always need to kind of value the experts you have around you. So like when I was an assistant, my manager would a lot of the times be kind of delegating a lot of, not I mean delegating, that sounds as if this person was not doing the tasks, but they were always kind of consulting with the appropriate sort of, they didn't think that their opinion was final. They would always, if it was a programming sort of decision, they would definitely speak to the head slash lead programmer and kind of consult them and use their knowledge and use their years of experience. Same with design, same with art. And it's kind of something you know it's something I learned at that stage because I'm involved in high level decisions, but when it comes to the nitty gritty of all these things, I'm just there to help make sure it goes out on time and that it happens, and the people who actually kind of make kind of create these things are the people who have that in their job role. So yeah, that's something I learned pretty quickly. And I'm glad I did because I know what I'm good at and I know what other people are better at.
I think it's to some extent an unspoken thing about leadership, where in reality, to some extent, it's about to some extent filling the gaps in
Yes,
that one lacks, right? And that ultimately the projects and games that we work on will ultimately be better if you have folks with you who are better or more talented or just generally more skilled.
Oh yeah,
in the field, right?
Yeah, no programming decisions here. Like I can help. I can help with resources. I can point you to the right people. Ask me anything, but if you're gonna ask me when the build will be ready, etc., lead programmer, please. Yeah, no. So yeah.
No, and Paula, how about yourself? Is there anything that you've learned from previous managers or
Yeah,
folks you've
well,
worked for?
I definitely agree with what you were saying, Robyn, about like trust. I think trust and communication, I think, are two of the most important skills as leadership, like as anyone in a position like leading people. If you trust your team and you trust people doing their jobs and like caring about the project or whatever, um, they're going to feel more valued. And that was definitely something that, like, when I was a team member and I had sort of like managers and art leads and stuff who trusted you, you could just feel the difference, and you didn't feel like as if like, yeah, someone was like expecting you to make a mistake or anything like that, and or if you did, like, you could learn from it. And it's just that sort of like building a sort of safe place. I think is a really, really important thing as a leader, trying to sort of foster an environment where people um, can fail, but it's like safe to fail, because like if you've got strong communication, then you can like ask when you're stuck and learn from each other. And then I think that's just really, really helps to make the project better, make the game better, and just make it a nicer place to work. I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways that I've had from like really, really good art leads, or just managers in general.
Well, perfectly leading from that, Alan, going from project to project, how have there been learnings from each project that you have then been able to apply to the general approach and culture to the team? Like, how how has your so you kind of jumped in, but then through each project, did you learn different aspects that you could apply to it, and like maybe even like what kind of elements did you find were important for a project in order to be successful, and to lead to the best outcome in terms of making sure that your team members were okay, as well as that the company was able to keep going?
Yeah, I think a big thing is when you ever in a company like ourselves where we do have lots of smaller projects, is always looking at kind of the bigger picture. Okay, this project's getting done. Let's not just think about this project. How can we better make this project also make the next project better? How can we help our tools or our processes improve in each iteration? So like even from just production side point, how do we do our meetings? Should we move more towards a sprinting or Kanban, or like, and kind of each iteration talking to the team and making sure finding what the whole team is preferring as a process. And it is, you can't have set at the start of one project for every project after, this is how we're doing production, or this is how we're doing programming, or this is how we're doing the art process. And each of these projects, building the tools and building the processes and making sure they are iterative going forward. I think that's the big thing for a company like ourselves, is just making sure we are building on that. We do a lot of external development, so we have seen lots of other companies how they do their processes, and picking and choosing like that. Really like that. Really don't like that. That's taking up away my time. But they got this really other cool thing. Let's take that and integrate it into our system. In each kind of way, just seeing how we can make the whole company improve. And yeah,
No, that's fantastic. And I was just actually going to say, learning from other companies as well is quite
Yes.
it's super important. I've definitely heard from teams who do work externally, or even as in some are teams within like a larger company. Um, what kind of aspects, Alan, have you found have been important in terms of that you've learned from, like, don't need to give us everything, but kind of like give a key aspect that you've learned from a project that has then impacted the company, and just like a key takeaway that has helped the company continue growing, I guess.
yeah. Just think of probably a good example is kind of how we should set up our Jira in terms of our sprints. Even it is like such a small thing, but there's a particular project we're working on, and they just had a really nice workflow, and we kind of, there's stuff in it we kind of didn't like, but taking that workflow and how a task goes from being the backlog to being into someone doing it, to kind of having an estimate on it, to then being into the QA, to actually being done, and that process of making it as smooth as possible, and so there's the least friction, and everyone knows what they're meant to do and when they're meant to do it, and there's no kind of having to go back to myself or a producer or something like that saying, what am I doing next? Nope, you know what you're doing next. There's already all set up for you, and making sure it is kind of reducing that friction. And yeah.
Okay, now I want to throw this one over to Paula. So you're part of Ant Workshop, and there's there is someone sitting above, right? So as in you're leading the art team, but at the same time you also have to interface with the head of the company. So how about how I guess the question then flips, right? Because all of a sudden, even though you're leading things and you're managing people, all of a sudden you're also having to kind of, shall we say, interface with the leader, shall we say? So, so how have you found that balance between knowing when to kind of stick to your guns uh, versus understanding, okay, look, there's a broader reality to this project that needs to be done. So just to touch on that, as in like how that dynamic kind of works.
Yeah, I think that was actually another thing that has been quite a big sort of learning curve for me, because we are such a small team. My boss is actually like super like keen on sort of me taking a lot of responsibility for things, which when I'd been sort of under other people, it was kind of more often than not, it would be making work and then waiting to see if it was approved, sort of thing. And now it's kind of flipped. So it's like yeah, I don't know, just sort of changing the mindset from thinking like, is this like good enough to be approved, to sort of just a much more collaborative process, I think, where, as I was saying before too, because you're looking at things as a whole, like as a whole project rather than just an individual task.
So all of a sudden it's become a situation where it's in a way you've been it's in a way they have done what is kind of what we were saying before, the kind of a really strong key point to leadership, which is the fact that you do delegate and hand off and trust. And so you basically found yourself in the ideal position where you are being trusted
Yeah,
with your decisions being allowed to kind of lead, basically.
yeah, which I think that was, yeah, quite a it's been really nice, and especially sort of the size that we are. It has actually allowed for like a huge amount of creativity and a big range of different projects to work on as well, which is super great. We do some portion work, but we also do our own sort of like IPs and stuff too.
Right.
So that's been like really exciting, just being able to sort of
just have the complete creative reign in terms
yeah, I know, it's like so that's been really exciting. And yeah, my boss is like super good with that, and I was like, oh, yeah, very encouraging and very like,
no, that's great. I'm gonna toss the same question over to Robyn. So in terms of because developers, we sometimes like to our work is never finished. So
Yeah.
just in terms of, so how have you got like how do you from your position basically, how do you manage things with leadership versus the folks that you're leading? Like how do you fit into that
Yeah.
puzzle?
So I think this is a dynamic with a lot of studios, but especially at mine. I have a head of department, and there's a couple of like, even though saying there's a hierarchy makes it seem as if some people are more important than other people. It's not. It's purely down to sort of like high level decision making. That's it. And I'm lucky, like Paula, where I can say that my head of department trusts me, I feel the trust. So, I feel like where, I was hired with that trust in mind. So I think it's also translating that as self-confidence. So sometimes when I feel unsure, I'm like, no, you got this. This is the right decision. You're paid. You're hired to kind of make this decision. And then that kind of that trickles down to the team then, where, I can kind of enact that same mentality that my leader gives to me. So what makes me feel comfortable and what makes me feel trusted is what I try, at least. I'm sure they might have it. I hope they feel that way, but I try to kind of give that to them as well. So, like I said before, when I was like, I'm not the authority on certain things like that, so for example, some of the people I hired at our studio were junior programmers, and I think sometimes they felt as if they couldn't make a decision because I was there looming over this decision. But it was I wanted to make them aware that I trusted them. I knew that I we picked them because of their ability, and the same sort of courtesy I was extended by my leader, I wanted to give to them. And it's nice to sort of be able to work under a leader that doesn't make you feel as if your opinions and your decisions are inferior to theirs, and that like that. That is something that I learned really quickly as well. I think I'm lucky I've worked under really awesome sort of managers, and I'm trying to emulate that. So yeah, that's kind of like how I that's how I
that's fantastic, because I think what's being demonstrated here is the importance of how culture propagates within a company, right?
Mm-hmm.
How the way that the leader leads impacts ultimately the way everyone else will follow, or how they
Yes.
will work with others. So no, it's just really great, because it's not even like it wasn't even necessarily the point of focus, but I think it does highlight the importance that a company's culture can have on
Yep.
individuals, as well as how those individuals lead
Yep.
their teams.
100%.
Um, I guess just going from that though, because you're describing deadlines, which is a reality all developers
My favorite.
have to contend with. So jumping off from that, aside from the fact of the processes we kind of use to figure out whether or not uh, how to appropriately, shall we say, manage a project in terms of delivery, but I was actually going to also throw out there in terms of what challenges has everyone faced, and what was the biggest challenge everyone here has faced in leadership? I mean, it could be deadlines, or figuring out how to get a team to cross over the line, or it could be something else entirely. So, uh, yeah. So, Robyn, why don't you kick us off?
Kick us off. Challenges. I would say, I I do think that it needs to be said sometimes when you're a minority in a studio, that was definitely a challenge, especially in leadership. Um, I don't want that to be glossed over. That is definitely something, as 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 something I've experienced. But also I think I was going to say synchronization, and I know that sounds really weird, and it sounds like, well, yeah, that's part of the job. But a challenge I faced was kind of when moving from assistant into kind of like full producer. Um, I started to have to take on board so many more people's sort of their deliverables, but also, their sort of like, I had to think about people's mental states, their sort of, man hours. And, it was a lot at first, trying to synchronize different teams, being that bridge between art, programming, design, when, I'm sure you guys all know that programmers and artists communicate in very different ways, let's put it that way. And yeah, so that was
I believe the proverb is the programmers deliver the ground and the artists deliver the sky. I believe
Exactly.
that
No,
that is
that's
kind of the
it. That
way
is it.
they're very
And
separated.
yeah, that is something, even though I kind of expected it, I thought I was going in all guns blazing. I was like, yeah, I've got this. But when I kind of was thrown into it, I was like, wow, yeah, this they really are totally different, and kind of, you know, it kind of relates to us talking about being able to kind of relate with the team members. I know I keep throwing back to that, but it's so true. Like I had that's something that was a big learning curve for me. Let's just put it that way. And that was definitely a big challenge. And also, I want to just kind of like add this on the end as well. Being taken seriously, maybe that was it could be an imposter syndrome esque feeling. I'm sure people around me took me seriously, and maybe I was kind of projecting that, but a confidence thing was also a big part of my sort of progression. And I think I hate saying fake it till you make it, but that definitely worked for me. Like, I think I faked it until it became reality. And now I'm like, I'm super confident in my decisions. And like, at one point, I was definitely like, I'm super confident, crying, like, after I made this decision. So yeah, I've got a list of challenges. Let's put it that way. That's a few of them.
No, no, that's great because we're gonna absolutely run with one of them, which is
Oh,
the
cool.
whole working cross discipline. So, Alan, how have you? So, in terms of having to work with, uh, basically managing cross discipline, and then if you have challenges of your own, please feel free to say. But let's, I think that is definitely something that's glossed over because it's almost a little, left brain, right brain situation. Oil and water, right? Like, I mean, I could keep throwing out so many
Yeah.
cliched analogies, right? Right. I could just keep spitting those out. But, Alan, what challenges have you faced in terms of, like, basically multidisciplinary, cross-discipline challenges, as well as like, or you can completely toss that away and just say like your own challenge. Up to you.
I think it is a challenge, the kind of cross discipline. It's kind of starting off. I a program by trade, and kind of this going from a student into then the studio, and then kind of building on that is all the founders kind of were programmers. So we all had that one
Oh, wow.
knowledge, and so it's challenging. At the start, it was kind of how do we best give these tasks to the artists? How do we best communicate and best do the flow process? And to be honest, at the start, we weren't really good at it. We really weren't. But kind of as we better understood what was actually needed, like what was a kind of task, or what was the thing that we need to say, this is what we need to get delivered, and how do we get to that point where if the programmer needs this, what does the artist need to do? Not what does it need to be, not what the programmer needs to get, what does the artist need to do to get to that point? And kind of getting to that process and making sure there is the pipelines there for everyone to communicate properly and everything, so everyone can put things in the engine and it just works.
So from your side, and we'll be flipping the question in a moment, Paula. So get ready. Um, so so Alan, what elements have you felt that have what kind of elements have you found are important in terms of communicating with the art side of things, for instance? Like I like that's an absolutely loaded question, and I totally get that because like if I were to ask the same question, I'd but but I guess it's what elements have you found in terms of communicating with artists have eased kind of the workflow, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it is just first of all setting up these pipelines and actually having them documented somewhere. So there is this is the one side of truth of this is how the artwork gets into the engine, and making sure both sides of the coin, the programmers know it and the artists know it, and that's how it will be. So that there's no kind of confusion. Like this is the naming convention. It is written down there. It's not like every time you're doing an art set, this is the naming convention, or this is the poly count, or this is and making sure everyone knows this is the poly count, this is the naming convention, we can't go over these limits, and it makes everyone's life easier if it's documented somewhere and it's kind of across projects or for a given project is set out.
No, that's actually really good, as in like almost proverbially having the same page that
Yeah.
everyone can work from,
Yeah.
and making sure things are communicated in a manner like I guess the best example I can give is like different languages, right? As in making
Yeah.
sure that kind of communication and clarity is there, such that when you're working, you don't have to worry about whether or not the thing that's being crafted matches up with what you guys are thinking.
Yeah.
So Paula, now the question is, uh, in terms of working with, because you, as you said, you're a small team. So what kind of things have you had to learn in terms of, shall we say, being closer to technical folks? Shall we say?
Yeah, just making sure that like communication is good. Also documentation is like super important. Just explaining like, okay, I don't know what these things are. Like that's a little bit too techy or a little bit too programmery. Like, can we bring it back? Can we make it a
I
bit
can
more
assure
like
you that is definitely the technically correct term.
programming?
We use that one all the time. We you know, I absolutely get what you mean. Sorry, I interrupted. Please continue.
Yeah, no. But yeah, so I think just yeah, just getting people to write things down if it's something that's got a few steps, or like even if it's like, you know, new tools like in Unity or whatever, that have been sort of custom built, instead of having to pester someone like 50 times. If it's sort of, there's processes set up so like things can be documented. And then if you still don't know, like just actually talking to people and just being like, hi, like, how do you do this again? Like, which settings do I have to put for these things? It's like I'm making some plants, they look really nice, but I don't know how they work. Like, how is it supposed to work with the engine or whatever? So, yeah, I think that just yeah, being upfront and also making sure things are written down so you can not have to pester everyone all the time.
So, bottom line, we keep like the same kind of common denominator in all this: communication,
Yeah,
clarity. Uh,
was bang on about it.
you know, like just yeah, but I think it speaks to, unfortunately, to some extent, how a lot of there's still, unfortunately, a lot of companies that do kind of miss that trick, right? In terms of making sure their organizations are set up such that folks can kind of that in a way folks are enabled in the best way possible to flourish and succeed in their careers, right, or succeed in their craft. So like, no, I mean it's really good that we keep circling back to like how important it is to be
Yes.
that everyone be chatting to each other. Um, so this is going to be another horribly loaded question, but I want to just throw out there, just generally out of curiosity, kind of what a what your like day-to-day responsibilities entail. I mean, I'm gonna throw this one out there generally, but Paula, do you want to kick us off, like in terms of like just walk us through a day of kind of being an art
Um,
director?
yeah, so I think where I'm at the moment is kind of a bit more unusual in the fact that kind of when we don't have a project where we need specific freelancers, I kind of do a little bit of everything. So like from helping with pitch documents through to sort of concept art, biz dev, then 3D modeling pipelines. So from like, you know, modeling, rigging, animating, texturing, getting it in engine, a little bit of VFX, a little bit of this or that. So that's kind of, yeah, day to days, very varied actually. But yeah, it's kind of a bit of everything at this stage. Yeah. So I think that's a little bit more unusual.
No,
But
no, no, no. I mean, I could totally feel that, because that is kind of exactly uh kind of the position I'm in, where it's just like, okay, I've got this admin stuff to do. At some point, I'll need to also implement something in the game, and then I'm probably going to need to review uh, what assets are missing or what needs to come in next into the project, so I can completely. Basically, I feel you.
yeah,
In terms of the, shall we say, amount of responsibilities that go with
I
uh,
guess as well, like if there are freelancers, then it's sort of doing that, but then also trying to sort of do manage, like figure out how they want to be managed, and then sort of figure out how feedback is best given and that sort of stuff, and to move stuff forward. But yeah.
all right, Robin, how about yourself?
I'm actually, this is kind of interesting because I'm the complete opposite. So I am So specifically, I'm a creative producer in marketing. So I have a different array of people on my team. So artists and programmers of varying levels. So my day to day, even though my sort of Monday and Tuesday might be different, my Monday to Friday, it's kind of there's a lot of the same in there. But so for example, day to day. Um, I know we all do our stand-ups, probably stand-ups meetings. Meetings are woo, that's my whole day a lot of the time. That they're important. They're all individually important, obviously. That's kind of part and parcel with like circling back to communication, but like talking with, being able to like communicate with the rest of the studio, liaising with different departments. What comes with that is meetings and talking and making executive decisions, sorry, with people in different departments. So that's a big part. A lot of my day is also task tracking. So I task track individually for each team member and also overall for projects, specific tasks, different. So, for example, testing for certain marketing assets, I will look at the metrics daily, weekly. I will also take requests from different departments and convert that into a task that can be assign tasks, look at tasks that are going over the time so that I can see where we can maybe make compromises, plan for the following week, work with external developers, work with external ad networks. Yeah, it sounds like a lot, but that's kind of the way that my week runs. I'm quite lucky. I know some people kind of thrive on, having these different day to days where they can experiment and dive into different things. But I'm one of those creatures that even though prior to going into production and leadership, I was quite, I would say like a creative soul, I've kind of turned into this sort of spreadsheet organization. Everything must be planned to the minute, including
Th
my lunch.
those
So,
those kind of folks are incredibly important when it comes to games.
right?
Even though, even
Thank you.
though,
No, I'm joking.
even though all the stuff that you're talking about is the stuff of my nightmares. But,
Right? Everyone
but,
says that to
but,
me.
but,
Everyone
but
says
I,
that,
I,
and I'm
but,
like,
I think that's the thing is, like that's the nice thing about having these kind of setups is, the benefit you get is when you're able to focus and specialize in a role, it means that you're not having to worry about the other aspects that say need to bring things together. But I mean, I certainly, uh, I mean, my producer friends laugh at me now because oh boy, at least 1 to 2 days a week, I'll be looking at a spreadsheet or looking at a timeline.
ha
Um,
ha ha.
and I think that's I think that's I think that is an aspect to it as well with leadership is beyond just interface like the social aspect of working with people, but it's also making sure that you're kind of having everything organized and that you're having to bear those things in mind and
Yep,
plan because ultimately that will impact
yep,
how uh, everyone else, and
yeah,
ultimately how the project turns out.
yeah. I mean, I think I got to the point where I went from not feeling organized enough to kind of going to this point where people have had to tell me, like, sometimes things will just come out of nowhere. You can't plan it. And I'm like, no, I want to be
you,
psychic
you,
so that I
you,
know what's
you,
coming.
you, you,
No.
you want to account for every kind of variance
Yeah.
that may occur
and
in a
and
project timeline.
sometimes you can't do that, especially at a studio like mine where the sprints are so short and there's a lot of turnover when it comes to the things that we create. A lot of the time stuff may get scrapped or something may get expedited, and I'm obviously everyone else is excited to work on it and I'm just sat there in the corner looking at my schedule like, no, no. So yeah.
uh, and with that, Alan, how is your day to day in terms of like doing things? So, like, do you also happen to be spending time with spreadsheets and planning things as well, or have you been graced enough to hand those things off to someone else to?
we're slowly managing to pass that off. My day-to-day is still very all over the place in terms of I am on sort of projects. I do have projects I am the programmer on, but I do also have to jump into all these other projects. Or if someone needs help in this project, then I'm going to be doing that project today, and kind of the open of knowing where the projects I know I'm on, I've got tasks to do on, but then being flexible enough to one of the junior programmers needs some help on this project, let's jump in, let's try and make sure that's still taking over. So it's kind of very much all over the place, but I have moved away from doing the spreadsheets and the sprints slowly moving away. Not quite there yet. I'm still doing lots of Jiras, but moving away slowly as the
Your loss.
Alan, I personally am glad that you freed yourself from the devastation that is spreadsheets.
One of us.
But jumping from that though, because meetings came up as a thing. So in terms of, I mean, seems a little bit meta that we're discussing it, but whatever. In terms of stand-ups and meetings, because I think it's fair to say it is definitely a part of leadership. And speaking for myself, the way that I view it is I try to minimize how much time is wasted, because I know to some extent some folks like to just be getting on with the things that they want to be doing and not just hanging around for a chat. So I would say in terms of that kind of topic, in terms of stand-ups, what kind of things do you guys do in terms of making sure that I guess, to put it very clinically, not waste anyone's time? So how do you best utilize meetings at times, as well as minimizing, shall we say, any excess time to a meeting? So, Alan, how do you handle meetings?
I think there's part of that I kind of disagree with how you see it. As a team, you kind of need to have that chit chat, especially being so virtual. Without the small talk, you're not really getting the culture, not really, especially onboarding someone remotely. If you're kind of just going meetings, this is what we're doing today, this is what we're doing today,
Yeah.
this is what we did yesterday. You don't really get that relationship, especially, as I say, in remote. Whereas in the office, you'd have that chit chat, someone comes in or someone goes out. But everything being virtual, you do need some of that chit chat, and trying to minimize that to the minimal is not really healthy in a larger team.
That's really interesting that you've highlighted that it can be counterproductive. But I mean, granted, like, I've always been working remotely, but that's a really, I like that. That's a really neat little point with regards to meetings. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I think it is that there is trying to, obviously you don't have meetings for meeting's sake, but it is making sure we're getting to the point, but we're also having that personal relationship, and what you're doing the weekend, what's the football like?
And Robyn, how about yourself in terms of working with different disciplines?
I'm kind of right now in the mentality of disagreeing with you, Alan, because I debate. No, I'm joking. No, I obviously, as a producer, I'm all for having meetings, instead of messaging people working from home, let's just call each other. But it's got to the point where I've had times where, in terms of trying to force that communication on artists and programmers alike, sometimes it is counterproductive. So I have quite a large team. And so when I'm planning for the following week, I'm trying to, I look at these meetings as numbers, not necessarily what that's where people may I may lose people on this because again, I'm looking at them as numbers, timing. So what we've got, in total 200 hours of man hours in the week, and then 75 of that is being attributed to meetings. I don't like that leaves me with 125 hours for work. So I will then be like, okay, so can we condense this into this? And I guess that's me looking at it from a numbers and sort of organizational standpoint, but in a kind of the benefit of it's really cool that Alan brought up working from home, because it some people don't have that sort of a osmosis effect of being in the office. So I'm in a situation where we were based in the studio. I was onboarded remotely, but my studio was 99% in the office, and then it's kind of trying to transition back into that with obviously government regulations. But yeah, and I find that those meetings and that communication is the way to kind of is to keep that sort of studio culture as well, like as informal as it is. All my team were onboarded virtually, like on Zoom or Slack, and I felt like there's always going to be something missing there when it comes to being around people and being able to communicate with someone in person. But yeah, that's why there's sort of two ways of looking at it, I guess, is the sort of benefits of just being able to speak to a person, but then also like, is this taking time away from the work that needs to be done? Yeah, I've got to be brutal like that, unfortunately.
No, it's good, but I guess in that sense, Paula, with a smaller team, like how often are you guys meeting, and like how, I guess how do I phrase this appropriately? Um, basically, in terms, where do you see meetings fitting in terms of how you can best fulfill your role in the team, if that makes any sense whatsoever?
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, so generally we have about 3 meetings a week. So like it'll be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it's just half an hour catch up, sort of. So everyone mentions what they're doing, and if someone's struggling, it's a perfect opportunity for people just to be like, actually, like, not sure about this, not sure about that, if they haven't contacted people directly about it. So that's great because yeah, I've definitely had previous places where like you're like, why are we doing the stand up every morning? It's taking like 15 minutes and what is being done? Like, yeah, so that's been really, really good. And then just being able to, I think because it's such an agile team, you can just message someone and say, can we jump on a quick call them up if you need any, like, yeah, need any direction on like anything, which has been really, really good because I feel like it still gives you a little bit of time for that sort of chit chat, catch up, but then also everyone sort of quickly goes around, mentions what they're doing, which is I think works nicely. I think.
No, that's fair enough. So I guess you kind of see the opportunity in between, as in like, as in like you found that the stand-ups for the sake of a stand-up were kind of useless, whereas like, whereas like being able to kind of either make it informal or just like shorter but regular basically strikes a nice balance, right? As in you're able to connect with other members of your team, but you're also kind of avoiding that whole like weekly drag that may occur when like first thing you go in and it's just like uh, being dragged in on topics that that aren't necessarily relevant to your role. Um, right. With that, I believe that takes us to the end of the panel. So I would like to thank my gracious panelists for their time and putting up with my terrible questions. And yeah, I think we'll leave it there. But for those of you who have stayed with us and have been watching, thank you very much. And yeah, everyone take care.